Welcome back to the football podcast, everybody. Rob Ogden and Tony Gerdeman here to break down the Buckeyes win in West Lafayette on Saturday. And with the Buckeyes on a bye, we can talk a little Big Ten maybe, talk a little BCS. But first, Ohio State defeats Purdue 56-0 on Saturday. Second consecutive game in which the Buckeyes put up 42 points in the first half. It was over pretty much. Well, I mean, some people might argue the game was over when it was scheduled, but it was definitely over by the second play of the game. Duran Grant gets the pick six, and it was really all the points the Buckeyes needed. I mean, they could have. I mean, even the extra point was all the points the Buckeyes needed.
Yeah, exactly.
They shut out
57 seconds in, and they didn't need anything else.
Pretty much over. So, what do we take from the game other than that Purdue is a really bad football team?
I think that Ohio State started and did what they wanted to do. You know, that's what Urban Meyer wants them to do, and they came out, started fast, and they didn't stop until the coaches made them.
Yeah, I saw a tweet that somebody was complaining that Urban was running up the score in the first quarter. Should have taken the starters out. But Grant's interception kind of seemed to set the tone for the secondary, at least. You know, they had one of their better games of the season. After the game, Meyer said that, it's no longer such a glaring weakness because he, at one point of the season, called the secondary alarming.
Yeah.
He stopped short of saying that it was a strength, but, he said it's something that, when the secondary plays well, they can be a really good football team, is the way he put it. So, is that a step in the right direction for them, or is it more, just a byproduct of Purdue being Purdue?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both, but once that happened, Purdue sort of had to reassess how they were going to move the ball, and they realized that they probably couldn't move it at all.
Yeah.
I think, obviously, things are coming together better because, Corey Brown has been able to get some time and get acclimated, and everybody is getting used to having him out there, and Duran Grant continues to excel. I mean, it's not obvious that he's not the best quarterback on the team.
Yeah, not at all. And when you get as much pressure up front as they did, I mean, they had 6 sacks. That's going to make it a lot easier on the secondary, and we saw that against Penn State as well. They had the 6 sacks on Saturday, and then the forced fumble in the backfield, and they clearly got the freshman quarterback as they did with Christian Hackenberg the week before.
Yeah, it's pretty nice getting to play all these freshman quarterbacks, and you don't have to really worry about having your blitz schemes, picked apart.
Yeah.
You might give up a play here or there, but Meyer talked about it, the week before that. They can afford to do that with the offense that they have, and even though they can afford it, they're still not giving up those plays.
Right. So definitely a good sign for them. I guess same question. I mean, are they getting this much better, getting that pressure, and compared from, remember the Iowa game where they got beat up, or is it just that Penn State and Purdue are terrible?
And Penn State's good enough to beat Michigan, so that's you can't just beat anybody and beat Michigan. You can't just beat a UConn or Akron. Those teams can't beat Michigan. But I think Ohio State is. I just said Ohio State because I've been watching too much Glenn Mason this week, but. They're coming together. They're getting better, as you want them to do this time of year. So I don't think it's just the opponents. I think they're also making bad opponents look ridiculously bad.
Yeah. Offensively, another great game for Braxton Miller. He did you no favors, though, coming out at the half. You predicted his first 300-yard game. He ends with 233 yards passing. What do you have to say for yourself?
Well, I'd say he was halfway there after one quarter, so it's not my fault. And I think Urban Meyer should be taken to task for this because, you know what? It's not my fault.
Playing the blame game.
Yes, that's what I do.
Well, you said Braxton would need 250 by the half. He almost got there. He had 233.
Yeah, and it's like, just bring him out for one more series. That's all you have to do. Just throw 3 or 4 passes, you've got him, then you yank him, and then you put Carlos Hyde in there for his 9 yards or 10 yards, whatever he needed. It would have been so perfect, and I could have, told people about how perfect it was. And
I mean, really, you didn't even get a whole half from him because they put Guyton in there. Guyton threw a touchdown pass in the second half.
Yeah, let's just move on.
All right. Anyway, Braxton finished 19 for 23 with 4 touchdowns. He did have the one interception, but he's on pace to pretty much annihilate the completion percentage record at Ohio State, which currently is just above 65%, which Troy Smith set in 2006. Right now, he's at 72.5%. Coming into the season, even though we knew he was improved, I honestly didn't think he would be above 70%. I know they said that was a goal for him, but, I mean, he's pretty well above it right now.
Yeah, I thought that was a pretty lofty goal. I was thinking that if he approached, 66%, then they should be happy with that. But, with the short passing game that they've got going, and it's working, I mean, he doesn't even really need to throw the ball up for grabs down the field, anymore because he's got guys running wide open 20 yards down the field. It's just really easy right now.
Yeah, and at this rate, with the opponents that are left on the schedule, I mean, it's not hard to see him staying up above 70%.
Two of his passes, I think only 2 of his passes hit the ground on Saturday, because one was caught out of bounds by Dontre Wilson.
Right,
the other was an interception. So, I mean, he's pretty on point right now.
Not that it matters, but that Wilson, I mean, he could have, if he just knew where he was in the field, he could have made that catch. But anyway, Miller named a semifinalist for the Davey O'Brien Award yesterday, given to the nation's top quarterback. He was one of 3 finalists for the award last year. Johnny Manziel ended up winning it. I don't personally see him getting back into that group this year just because of all the time he missed and the names on that list. I mean, Manziel, Mariota, Bridgewater, Taj Boyd, Winston, McCarron, Murray, Mettenberger, Jordan Lynch, Brett Hundley. Yeah, and that's a lot of good quarterbacks right there.
Yeah, and, those guys haven't missed 3 games like Braxton did.
Right.
If he had played all of the games, then go ahead and put him up there. But, just with the time missed, even though he's playing superbly right now, it's I can't put him up there. Semifinalist is fine. I can't see him being a finalist at it.
Yeah,
at all.
And I named those 10 guys, but there's 16 guys on the list. The other 5, right. I can't even remember who they are. But so he's up against some tough competition. Good to be named a semifinalist to get some recognition, I guess.
What about Kenny?
That's the question. I'm sure there's some out there who believe that Kenny should have been included on the list. Like we said, he gets into that game relatively early, gets the touchdown at the end. Then he has a couple rushing touchdowns in the second half. He finishes with 98 yards. And after the game, Meyer was asked, if he had the 2 best quarterbacks in the Big Ten. He kind of avoided the question and said he had the 2 that he would take. But, I don't know, I'm sure there are people out there who think Guyton's one of the 16 best in the nation and definitely one of the 2 best in the Big Ten.
Well, if you put him on that list, then he has to win because, he's Kenny Guyton.
Right.
But, I wrote last week about Kenny Guyton was he needed 33 pass attempts or completions to be in the top 2 all-time at Ohio State for a season in passing efficiency, and he was 8 of 11. So he might get there.
Yeah.
Just because he's going to be playing so much in the second half. It would be pretty crazy to have your 2 quarterbacks from one team be the top 2 passing efficiency season, record holders at Ohio State, and I didn't think it was possible for Guyton to get there, but they keep throwing him out there, and he's going to do it.
Yeah, we talked about this last week, whether we thought Guyton was the second best quarterback in the Big Ten. Mm-hmm. I guess my take is, Guyton's a great facilitator. He can get the ball to the playmakers, but when you need your quarterback to be your playmaker, like Michigan and Nebraska, I don't think they would take Guyton over the guys that they have, just because Guyton's not that playmaker back there. He can't be your entire offense like Braxton Miller can, or
Taylor Martinez,
yeah. So, I don't know. What's your take on that?
Well, I think if he can stay healthy, then they take him over Taylor Martinez because Martinez isn't healthy right now.
There's that factor.
But I guess if you're a Kenny Guyton fan, you have to be happy that he's not behind Michigan's offensive line right now and getting destroyed week after week. So,
right.
But...
Yeah, Devin Gardner's another one of those guys who he's kind of their entire offense, so...
But, is there anybody that's clearly ahead of Kenny Guyton other than Braxton Miller in the Big Ten?
No, and that's what Urban said, and that's all the players that were asked that question said without hesitation that Guyton and Braxton are the best 2. Guyton was asked that, and he said that he's the second best or whatever. And Tom Herman gave a little more of a political answer. He said you'd have a hard time convincing him that there was a better quarterback than Kenny Guyton, which is kind of sidestepping the question, but also at the same time saying yes. I don't know, speaking of Tom Herman, he has a newborn son, Maverick.
Yeah.
And I found out on Saturday his older son, middle name, Danger. So there's that for you. Supposedly that's true. Back to the game, though. Carlos Hyde, we mentioned him. He's limited to 8 carries. They didn't really need him, but he managed to finish with 111 yards. You mentioned that he had 91 at the half, and then he said that Coach Meyer looked at the stat sheet at the half and told him, "I'm going to give you one more carry to get 100 yards." He goes out in the second half, he gets 1 carry for 20 yards. So he gets over the century mark for the 4th straight game. He's on pace to surpass the 1,000-yard mark against Michigan, which would make him Meyer's first 1,000-yard back. The way he talked after the game, he seemed like it was actually kind of important to him. So, we'll keep our eye on that.
Yeah, running backs want that, and I think sometimes offensive linemen want it even more.
Yeah, he mentioned that he wanted to do it for Meyer, for the linemen, not just, for for his own pedigree.
But I mean, Meyer has to hear about it all the time on the recruiting trail. So, this would be, he got to hear a little bit less of it after Braxton did it, but then it became, well, he's never had a 1,000-yard running back.
Right.
So, I mean, barring any injuries, that'll change here pretty quickly.
Would you have predicted, going into the Florida A&M game that Hyde would have rushed for 1,000 yards this season?
Well, considering how slowly he started last year and he was 30 yards away, I mean, as long as he was the guy that was going to be getting the ball, then, he wouldn't have been any further off pace than he was last year, and he would have had 2 extra games this year to do it. So, I think it wrote back then that, he's still on pace even though he hasn't touched it. But that was only if he became the man again. Because, when he was on suspension, we talked about, who,
right.
Does he come, how soon does he come back?
Right.
Considering how well Jordan Hall was playing,
does he even take the job back?
Right, yeah, so.
But, he's been dominant. I mean, 4 straight games over 100 yards. If he keeps on that pace, he could even break it before the Michigan game.
Mm-hmm.
If he goes for 150 in his next 2. What is he at, like 7 something? I think he's at 7 something.
Yeah, 701, I think.
701, yeah.
So, I mean, strangely, it would be up to the Ohio State defense to get scored upon to where the Ohio State offense has to keep Carlos Hyde in the game.
Right.
Because, I mean, he could have had 200 easy in this game.
Oh, sure.
So, if there's ever a point where they're in a 14-point game for an entire 60 minutes, then, he's going to have 25 carries and, 180 yards.
Yeah.
Easily against the defenses they're going to be facing. I mean, he could have 150 against Indiana.
Sure.
Or Illinois in the first half. Yeah.
Jeff Hireman had 116, I believe, all in the first half. I think so. Against
Might have been.
Purdue. He had 5 receptions. He had the touchdown. It was the first 100-yard day for an Ohio State tight end since Ricky Dudley did it, 1996 Citrus Bowl. Is that a sign of more things to come, or just them exploiting something in Purdue's defense?
Well, they talk about how they always want to get the tight ends involved, but the
Right.
defense will take it away.
Defense doesn't give it to them.
Yeah, and then obviously the defense was more than happy to give it to them because Hireman was. I'm not sure if he was covered maybe once on those passes, and because he was simply running wide open.
I mean, nobody within 10 yards.
Yeah, in the flats, down the seam, on a corner route. I mean, it didn't matter. They didn't even worry about him.
Yeah. Nick Van Eck got the touchdown too. That short touchdown pass. First time 2 Buckeyes caught touchdown in the same game since I think it was like 06. I wrote it, but I forget it.
Yeah.
Was it 06?
I think so.
All right. Well, so there's that. A lot of guys banged up in the game, though. Curtis Grant, Joshua Perry, Michael Bennett, Taylor Decker, they all leave the game with injuries. Myers said they'd all be good to go, he thinks, by next Saturday when they go to Illinois. Taylor Decker's the one a little more serious with the MCL sprain, but Myers said he should only be out a week or 2, so he might be back for that game, the way Meyer was talking.
A lot of times it's easier for offensive linemen to deal with those knee issues.
They're not doing the athletic type of moves.
Don't tell them they're not doing athletic type of stuff.
We know Joshua Perry had surgery on his hand yesterday. We don't know much more. I'm sure we'll find out more today when Urban speaks, but as of 11 a.m., we don't know a lot. I don't believe it's related to the injury he suffered in the Purdue game.
Yeah, that didn't seem like a hand thing.
No, it seemed like a shoulder or arm or something. But we know he had surgery, but I don't think it's supposed to keep him out long. Like I said, we're not really sure the details yet. OSU spokesman wouldn't confirm anything.
Yeah, and at one point, both Grant and Perry were on the sidelines, and
they went
Joe Berger and Cam Williams came in, and Cam Williams was actually in the backfield making a play. So I mean,
I think Grant and Perry went down on back-to-back plays. Might have been. And after the game, Luke Fickell said that it was just football injuries, nothing that's going to keep him out, just wear and tear of playing a game. So that makes me think that the hand surgery was something that was not related. But we'll give you an update on that as soon as we get it. And then Jordan Hall, we mentioned, he's still banged up, I guess, having that same knee issue that he tweaked before the Northwestern game that kept him out of that game. So he didn't play at all Saturday. Myers said he'll be fine. But with the way Elliott's running, Ezekiel Elliott, the freshman, I don't know if Jordan Hall is going to get another carry this season.
Yeah, I mean, Elliott has earned his carries, and he's done stuff with them. I mean, Jordan Hall did as well, but I don't think they're missing anything not having Hall in there because Dontre Wilson is getting the ball too.
Yeah, I mean, it almost seems like Elliott's earned that second string role. It's hard to tell because Hall's not in there.
Yeah.
And it's an unfortunate situation for him to, be where he was at the beginning of the season, and Hyde comes back and he gets hurt, so then he gets set back even more. So it's got to be frustrating for him, no doubt. But we'll see if he gets back, when he gets back, where he kind of stacks into things.
And, if he's not 100% healthy, then he's not as good as Ezekiel Elliott. So
definitely not. I'm also wondering about Adolphus Washington back there. We haven't heard much about him. We know he had the groin injury earlier on, and then a week or two later, he had the ankle injury. He missed the Cal game with that groin injury, and I think the Florida A&M game he missed. I think he missed two. Maybe he missed one complete game, and he didn't start the second game or something. I know Bosa's started a couple games.
Yeah, he's missed 2 games this year.
Yeah, but Bosa's still starting, and he's playing well enough that no one's really talking about Adolphus Washington. It's just, it's weird. Going into the season, Adolphus Washington was on everybody's list for all Big Ten. He's going to be a dominant force in the D-line. He's just waiting for his breakout season. And then now he's kind of in the shadows of this freshman. Is it because he's injured, or has he just been overtaken for that number 1 spot?
Well, earlier in the year, they said that Joey Bosa has to be out there because he's one of the best 4. But, Washington was dealing with an injury. But they said Joey Bosa is a starter. And then, when Washington comes back, he came off the bench against Wisconsin, but he started in front of Bosa against Northwestern.
Yeah.
And, now Bosa's back starting again. So, is it? I think obviously some of it is injury, but I think the rest of it is Bosa. You know? I mean, is it a little bit from column A and column B? But, what happens? What I want to know is what happens when Washington is fully healthy.
Right.
It may not be this year because they'll just keep rotating, but next year, they have to be on the field together, right?
You would think. Is there any way that you can limit, if Washington is what we thought Washington was, can you limit him to what he's been limited to the past 2 or 3 weeks, which is, a limited amount of snaps, but nothing really. He's not in there enough to really even make an impact at this point.
Yeah, he's got a sack and a half and some tackles for loss, but he's not healthy, and he's not the player that you expected. But you have to think that once he is healthy, that player comes back.
Yeah.
And then next year, considering how good Joey Bosa is now, imagine him with a year in the weight room, and you can't take that guy off the field.
Yeah. So. Really, Adolphus is Washington one of the. Would you say he's one of the top 4 guys on the D-line right now? Because Bosa is one, Noah Spence is one, and Michael Bennett is one.
Right. I would say. See, it's hard because the nose tackles, they do so much stuff that you don't really see.
Right.
And they're important and you need them, and I don't know that, you have to have one, and that's not Adolphus Washington.
Right.
So.
Anything else we want to add about the beatdown at Purdue?
I don't think so.
Okay. Elsewhere in the Big Ten, since the Buckeyes aren't playing this Saturday, talk a little bit about Michigan State. Sparty beats them pretty handily Saturday. Michigan's just a bad football team. I don't know what else there is to say about that. They only get 6 points. They haven't scored a touchdown against Michigan in 3 games now or something like that. Did you see that stat?
Yeah, the last 2 games they haven't scored against Michigan State. Or are you talking about Michigan State not giving up a touchdown in 3 games?
No. Michigan has not scored a touchdown against Michigan State since 2011 or something.
Mm-hmm. They've just been getting beat up. They get beat up front on both sides, and Michigan did a good job against Michigan State's running game until the end, and by that point they were already beat down. They quit. They didn't want to be there anymore. It was embarrassing.
And it gets tough for Michigan, a little bit tougher for Michigan State coming up because they got to go to Nebraska and to Northwestern in back-to-back weeks. Are those games that you think they'll be able to win? And are they a legit contender in the Big Ten?
I think so. I think anytime you have a defense that attacks, you can disrupt an offense. Urban Meyer said all year he doesn't like dealing with aggressive defenses. That's why he wants his defense to be aggressive. And, you don't get any more aggressive than what Michigan State offers. But, they've got a week to prepare for Nebraska.
Yeah.
We don't know how healthy they'll be. They may start the game healthy, but how healthy will they be, once they get hit a couple of times and Michigan State's going to hit them? The Huskers were down to their 3rd-string quarterback this week. Do you want 3rd-string walk-on? He got the Hail Mary this time. Do you expect him to do it again? And then Northwestern has Have they quit?
Gosh.
They get beat up, and Michigan State seems like, they will just roll through them. But there's always, the Sparty, screw up. They finished the season with Minnesota. That's in East Lansing. I don't think that'll be an issue. But at some point, they have to trip up, right? Just because that's who they are. Don't you think?
I mean, they lost to Notre Dame. Does that count? Notre Dame's pretty terrible. Think about had they not lost that game to Notre Dame, though. I mean, are they a top 10 team?
They have to be because they'd be undefeated.
Right.
And that's how do you lose to Notre Dame?
That's bad because Notre Dame's not good, and that I mean,
Purdue gave Notre Dame a game.
Oh, I know. That was Purdue's closest game of the year, other than the Indiana State or whoever it was. But I mean, Nebraska's at this point they're still in it. If they win out in the Big Ten, they're going to the Big Ten championship game.
Oh yeah.
Which I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I mean they only have one loss.
But yeah, they have that one loss to Minnesota. Like you said, they got the Hail Mary last week. They'd have to beat Michigan and Michigan State in back-to-back weeks.
I tell you what I've been thinking is that Michigan was lucky they got Minnesota when they did, because they got Minnesota when the Gophers had no confidence.
Yeah.
Now they're confident. Michigan is not confident.
Yeah.
I'm not saying Michigan would lose, but I think Minnesota thinks they're good right now, and it seems to be working for them.
They don't want to lose that game. What is it like? Is that an axe or a jar or a jug or something?
It's a jug.
It's a jug.
It's a little brown one.
That's right. The little brown jug. I mean, that thing's important. You do not want to lose that game.
Never lose a game where a drinking receptacle is involved.
Exactly. I mean, that's life advice right there.
Yeah. Since the caveman times.
Of course. I think it's in Ohio State's best interest, though, if Sparty wins out.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I think they're 17th right now. But if they beat Nebraska convincingly, which they should, I mean, you would think.
Yeah.
They beat Northwestern convincingly, and then they beat Minnesota convincingly. Maybe they crawl into the top 12, maybe?
Yeah, I think that would be a good goal for them. I mean, their last 3 games, they've given up 9 points total.
Yeah.
So they're not just squeaking by. I mean, they're doing things. The way they're playing defense, it's catching everybody's eye. They're the top defense in the country, and people know it. So it's not like they're just sliding under the radar. You know, they're starting to get more notoriety. I don't think they'll get to the top 10 or anything like that, but you have Ohio State has never. Urban Meyer hasn't beaten anybody in the top 15 or whatever, or even played them. I think that'll change in the Big Ten championship game as long as Sparty doesn't trip up. I
mean, I don't know how much it'll matter whether a win over a number 12 ranked Michigan State will do anything for the Buckeyes, but it'll be better than a win over an unranked Nebraska team or whatever.
Or a 4-loss Michigan team. Or,
exactly. So I mean, maybe it'll do a little bit for Ohio State's perception, the Big Ten's perception at least. If Michigan State can seem like a somewhat competent football team,
especially when you'll hear the talk about, well, Michigan State has a defense that can contain Ohio State, and if that doesn't happen, then you have to give some credit somewhere.
Right. Moving on to the BCS, the Buckeyes are 4th for the 3rd straight week. Florida State and Oregon flip-flop for the second time. Florida State's back to number 2 after annihilating another top 5 team.
Yeah.
If they win out, they really need to be in the national championship game at this point. But
over who?
Over anybody. And honestly, I think they're the number 1 team in the country based on what they've done.
All right, then, since we can agree on that, what about whose record, whose road has been better between Alabama and Oregon?
I think it's definitely Alabama at this point. I mean, they've at least had the win over Texas A&M. I don't think Oregon. I mean, they have that UCLA win, but how good is UCLA? We don't really know at this point because they haven't really beaten anybody.
No, they haven't.
If the season ended now, I think Alabama. I mean, it's a shame because you have all these undefeated teams. It's a real shame, but I think Florida State is the number 1 team and Alabama's number 2. That's just me, though.
Yeah, and I think once we see what they continue to do and the teams they continue to play with the teams left on the schedule, that it'll be those 2 because I don't. Oregon has Stanford left.
Right.
That's coming up. I'm not a big Stanford guy. I'm not too impressed by that.
No, me neither.
Their loss to Utah was a bad loss. Utah is like 1-3 in conference play, and their only win is against Stanford. So.
Yeah, Oregon-Stanford on Thursday. That'll be big for Ohio State fans. Maybe Oregon gets knocked off in that one. Baylor-Oklahoma also on Thursday. That might be big just to keep Baylor off the Buckeyes' tail. Tough road ahead for Baylor. They got Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Texas, TCU. I don't see them going undefeated, but they are a double-digit favorite on Thursday.
everybody loves the offense, and until Kansas State slowed them down a little bit, but they still scored 35.
Yeah.
So Oklahoma hasn't really shown that they can. I mean, they got worked by Texas.
Yeah.
And Baylor is far beyond Texas. So,
right.
And I think Baylor will be able to do what they want on Oklahoma, but I also think Oklahoma can score too. So it's going to be a fun one to watch.
And then on Saturday, Alabama LSU. That's maybe one of Alabama's best shots at taking a loss. They still have number 9 Auburn to close out the season, and then likely Missouri in the SEC championship game. But LSU, that's potentially a game that Alabama could lose. Les Miles, you never know what he's going to do.
That's true. I like Alabama in that one, but I think LSU can go downfield.
Yeah.
So if you can do that, you've got a quarterback with a big arm. Quarterback. So they've got big receivers, and I don't think Alabama is as good as everybody says they are, but I also don't necessarily think that LSU is anything great either.
It's tough to pick against Alabama at this point.
Especially at home.
At home, yeah. I mean, you never know. LSU they gave them a game last year. Mm-hmm. They almost should have beaten them in that game last year.
Yeah, they weren't. I don't know that LSU's offense certainly wasn't as good as it is this year. But
so we'll see. But those 3 games Buckeye fans will definitely be watching and telling this weekend. And, I mean, it's possible by the end of the weekend Ohio State could be top 2 in the
could be right where they want to be.
Right where they want to be. I mean, it's not likely to happen, but definitely possible. And then
what happens if they're 2 and Baylor is 3?
And Baylor wins, you mean?
Yeah, and Baylor's 3, they win, and they're right behind Ohio State. And how long will Ohio State be able to hold off
Baylor? I mean, if Baylor goes undefeated, can Ohio State hold them off?
I don't know, because Oklahoma's number 10 right now, so they'd have a win over the number 10 team. That's something Ohio State is not going to have.
And Oklahoma State is what, 15 or something?
Yeah, they're around there
13,
too. So
or whatever they are. Yeah. So that'd be maybe 2 top 15 wins with. I'm not sure what Oklahoma State is. It's definitely 2 wins of a ranked team if they did that.
Yeah, Oklahoma State is 14.
14.
Right now.
Okay, yeah. So there'll be 2 top 15 wins.
Yeah, so Buckeye fans better be rooting for Big Game Bob.
I mean, it's if you just Team A, Team B, you look at the statistics, you look at the schedule. I don't think you can take Ohio State over Baylor.
No, I agree, because even though Ohio State is winning impressively now, this is what Baylor's been doing all year long.
All season.
Yeah.
And teams get better, but I mean, if you take Ohio State's name off of it, their wins aren't more impressive than Baylor's if both teams are going undefeated.
No, I agree completely.
I personally don't think Baylor's going undefeated, but we'll see how that turns out. I mean,
I don't know how I feel. I mean, I got swept up by West Virginia's offense last year, and they completely tanked, so I'm a little gun-shy. But Baylor's offense, I mean, it's not just a passing offense, because they can run the ball just as well, too.
Yeah, those teams that they have great offenses, though, but they give up a lot of points, they always seem to lose. Yeah. That's Oregon, historically.
It takes, one defensive line to punch them in the mouth a little bit, and that has an offense that can score.
Exactly.
And
those teams always seem to lose one game.
Maybe that's Oklahoma this year.
Yeah, maybe. Like we said, Oregon, they got Stanford. Then they'll have a Pac-12 championship game most likely against maybe Arizona State. At this point, they're on the top of that side of the division. I don't know. It's just all these teams aren't going undefeated. It's not going to happen. But it would be really nice to have a 14 playoff this year.
Yeah, 1 year too late on that, because that's what that playoff is made for. What's going on this year?
Exactly.
Because then, you think of all the teams behind the top 4 who would want to be in the mix this year, like a Baylor or Fresno or whomever. But I'm willing to forego, those teams 5 through 8 being upset just to get the top 4 in there.
Yeah,
that's always been my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, imagine how fun that would be. Alabama versus Ohio State, Florida State and Oregon. Yeah, in a 1-game playoff to get to the championship game. Man, that'd be fine. Although, as it is now, we might see Oregon and Ohio State both undefeated playing in the Rose Bowl, which would be terrible.
It would be it'd just be a worthless result to
it'd be awful.
An incredible season.
The biggest, most pointless Rose Bowl of Rose Bowl history is what it would be.
I mean, it would be huge ratings-wise,
right?
But it would be so hollow,
right? Yeah, I mean, what
it would be like a Wisconsin Rose Bowl.
It would be like a Wisconsin Rose Bowl. I mean, if you're Ohio State, and this is all hypothetical because there's still 4 or 5 more weeks of the season or whatever, it's most likely it's not going to happen. Some teams are going to lose. But if you're Ohio State and you're going to the Rose Bowl and you're undefeated, How motivated are you? I mean, are you running around after the Big Ten championship game with roses in your mouth?
Well, you know what? I think they'd be more motivated than Oregon, who most people think would deserve more of a shot than Ohio State. So they've been, bouncing back between 2 and 3 all year. Would they be even more devastated?
Yeah,
than Ohio State?
I mean, is there a chance that you go out and you try to annihilate them because then you hope that the championship game is a really poorly played game and you're voted
the AP vote,
the AP national champions?
But I think that's one thing you'd have to do. But
it's just a shame. I mean, the BCS is awful. I good riddance. I cannot wait for the playoff next year. Although next year it'll be like no undefeated teams, and it'll be like
no undefeated team.
Like, bring back the BCS.
The fourth team will be a 2-loss team. Yeah.
Some Vegas odd makers say Bama, Florida State, Oregon, Baylor, Texas A&M, all 6 points favorites over Ohio State on a neutral field. I don't quite agree with Baylor and Texas A&M on that. I don't know. What's your thoughts?
I don't see Baylor or Texas A&M being able to stop the Ohio State running game.
Yeah.
I think obviously those teams would score on Ohio State because they score on everybody, but I just see Ohio State controlling the line of scrimmage, controlling the clock, and keeping the ball away, and just how in the world would those two teams stop Carlos Hyde and Braxton Miller right now?
Yeah, they don't have the defense to do it, which is why I mean, in fact, I would favor Ohio State against those two teams on a neutral field.
I think Ohio State's defense would do more against those teams than their defenses would do against Ohio State. So
the same odds makers say Oregon would be the favorite over everybody on a neutral field. That's a little bit interesting, just because it seems like everybody has a love affair with Bama. Mm-hmm. So it's the fact that they're saying Oregon would be the number one team is interesting. But
I think they also have, people also love Oregon's offense.
Yeah.
But they still have seen it beaten up before, and in big bowl games, and I think they don't think that's going to happen this year. Apparently,
let's just hope this thing plays out where the best two teams go undefeated, right, and the rest of the teams end up losing. So that way, because it'll be a shame for college football if we've got 4 undefeated teams at the end of the season and only 2 of them get to play for the national championship. But I guess let's wrap this thing up. We can move on to basketball now. So stay tuned for our first basketball podcast of the year coming up right after this. Until next week, see ya.
Goodbye.